the 21st century icon and discover the facts as we unearth the legend of Kratos. Ancient Greece, the birthplace of Western ideology and culture. It was here that the art of Athenian tragedy and theater was developed and perfected. Tragedy, it is the storytelling genre that has shaped much of Western drama, and it is the foundation of the story of God of War.
One of the main features of a Greek tragedy is that it contains a tragic hero. And usually it's a male. There are some females that would count, but in most cases it's going to be a male character who does something wrong.
A tragic hero is a character from Greek mythology who is usually a person of high social standing, often somebody who's on a path towards greatness, has a strong character, but something will go wrong and he'll veer off on a path towards tragedy.
So a number of Greek heroes share these qualities. We can look at Hercules, Jason, Theseus, we have Perseus, and they embody these traits of achieving an almost godlike status themselves, typically through the help of the gods.
As the greatest captain of the Spartan army, Kratos maintained a fearsome reputation of ruthlessness and brutality. He garnered respect and awe by showing no mercy in his methods.
They've built this temple to offer prayers to Athena! This entire village stands as an affront to Lord Ares! Burn this village! Burn it to the ground!
But Kratos has one fatal flaw, known to Greek tragedy as hamartia.
Aristotle wrote a book called The Poetics, and in that he gives us a formula for Greek tragedy. In the Poetics, he said that a good tragic hero makes a mistake, and he used the word hamartia.
The idea of hamartia is that a character will, sometimes through no fault of his own, will make a mistake or some kind of error in judgment, which leads to a tragic downfall.
The tragic hero has a flaw running through him, some moral blind spot that prevents him from recognizing his own fallibility, his own weakness. So as he tries to accomplish great things, sooner or later he's going to misfire and create a terrible disaster.
The thing that really leads to Kratos' downfall is his need for victory. He wants to be the best on the battlefield, and he's going to do whatever it takes.
I think it's actually more of a contemporary tale than it is classical in that how much will you sacrifice? I think the theme was how much will you sacrifice to get what you want, and he ultimately sacrifices his family.
Where the barbarian king's about to defeat him, and he signs a pact with Ares at that point, and you're not really concerned about anything else except for having the barbarian king's head for himself.
Ares! Destroy my enemies, and my life is yours!
As a result of this one terminal flaw of character, his greed for victory, Kratos starts a chain of events that would lead to his lifelong condemnation of guilt. As a servant of Ares, he butchers all those who oppose his new master. And a new weapon is bestowed by Ares befitting his servant, the Blades of Chaos, eternally chained to Kratos as a reminder of his debt to the god of war. And so the relationship between mortal and god flourishes, founded upon a shared sense of brutality and violence, until Kratos encounters that one fateful village loyal to Athena.
Beware, Kratos. The dangers in the temple are greater than you know.
Now, in some cases, the mistake is bad. For instance, somebody who really thinks that they're better than the gods, that they can outwit the gods, and then the mistake moves from being hamartia to being hubris.
Hubris is defined as pride or arrogance. It's basically an overreaching when a human being behaves beyond his station.
So Kratos is about to walk into the temple that's going to change his life. And the oracle's there, and she warns him, you know, if you go in here, you're going to suffer a severe and extreme punishment.
With hubris in his heart, Kratos pridefully ignores the oracle's admonition and slaughters his way through the temple. It was, however, a tragic mistake.
My wife, my child, how they were left in Sparta.
With his own hand, the Spartan captain unknowingly slays the only people he has ever cared for. A sin that not only stains his soul for eternity, but also leaves an indelible mark on his own body.
From this night forward, the mark of your terrible deed will be visible to all. The ashes of your wife and child will remain fastened to your skin, never to be removed.
Titans means gray, white earth, or clay. This may have something to do with an ancient ritual of mourning where people smear ashes over their body, giving themselves a grayish appearance.
His skin whitened by the ashes of his guilt, Kratos would be known forevermore as the ghost of Sparta. But while most Greek tragedies conclude with the downfall of the hero, the story of Kratos and God of War actually begins where the tragedy would end. With the guilt over the death of his family bearing down on his soul, Kratos discovers who is ultimately responsible for their murders.
You are becoming all I'd hoped you'd be, Kratos. Now, with your wife and child dead, nothing will hold you back. You'll become even stronger. You will become death itself. Ares!
Ares, the god of war, is known for his relentless rage. Just never knew when the guy would just snap, break off, start a fight with someone, start a war somewhere.
He really represents the kind of passion of violence and war. He's very ruthless. He's a very unpopular god. Even though he's an important god, he's one of the Olympians, he's the most hated.
In Athens, where even now my brother Ares lays siege, as we speak, Athens is on the verge of destruction. It is the will of Ares my great city fall. Zeus has forbidden the gods from waging war on each other. That is why it must be you, Kratos. Only a mortal trained by a god has a chance at defeating Ares.
And with that decree, Kratos finds himself caught between one of mythology's greatest rivalries.
There's a long-standing animosity between Ares and Athena. It represents the eternal resentment of brute strength against shrewd strategy that overcomes it.
Athena, being the half-sister of Ares, is also revered as a warrior goddess, a goddess of warfare, but completely in contrast with Ares. While she represented the more intelligent, strategic, defensive warfare, Ares was all-out attack, aggression, chaos, bloodshed.
And in the mighty battle between the two siblings, an oracle informs Kratos that there is but one weapon that can stop Ares from destroying Athens.
Choose your enemies wisely, Kratos. Your brute strength alone will not be enough to destroy Ares. Only one item in the world will allow you to defeat a god. Pandora's box.
In Greek mythology, women are actually a separate creation. And to punish men, Zeus ordered that a woman be created. And the first woman is Pandora. In addition to this, they gave her a jar.
The Greeks actually understood Pandora's box to be a jar. It was only in the 16th century with Erasmus, probably through a mistranslation, that the jar was transferred over to what we think of now as Pandora's box. The jar was given to Pandora on her wedding day, and she was told not to open it. Like many women across the centuries, she was consumed with curiosity, and she couldn't resist opening it. And when she did so, all of the evils in the world flew out. So disease, plague, famine, anything bad you can think of basically came out. The one secret key is that hope stayed inside Pandora's jar. Hope is what gives humans the kind of will to go on living, to keep looking forward to the future.
And then there's an ambiguity that there's one thing left in the jar, which is hope. Now, some people would say that this is actually, it's so sad human beings don't have hope. And so everything bad got out and the one good thing stayed in the jar. In the Greek mind, actually, hope isn't necessarily always a positive thing. It might lead you to look for something that you don't have. And so the idea is that you're always hoping for a future that's never going to come, or hoping for some change that will never come.
Pandora's box is great because it contains all of the evils, known to man. They're all locked up in one place. You've got hate, you've got greed, you've got suffering and pain all inside of this box, and Kratos opens it up, and he manifests itself into him turning into a giant. And at that point, he's got the strength to take Ares on. Athena knew that this was essentially the ultimate weapon. It was a nuke, if you will, in Greek mythology.
But acquiring Pandora's mythical box is not going to be an easy task for Kratos.
The box exists. It is the most powerful weapon a mortal can wield. With the box, many things become possible. And so it is hidden well, far across the desert of lost souls. There is safe passage through the deadly sands, but only those who hear and follow the siren's song will discover it. Only they can guide you to Kronos, the Titan.
A Titan lives?
Kronos is the last. Zeus has commanded him to wander the desert endlessly, the temple of Pandora chained to his back, until the swirling sands rip the very flesh from his bones.
The Titans were powerful deities who were overthrown by a younger race of gods known as the Olympians in what's known as the Great War.
The most famous of the Titans is Kronos, the father of Zeus. And the problem is that Kronos understands that Zeus will also have to depose him. It's basically a cycle of violence that's going on in the early history of Greek mythology, where son always overthrows father. So Kronos has this problem, which he has to stop his own son, Zeus, from overthrowing him. So he decides to swallow all his children. And by swallowing them, he hopes that they'll never see the light of day, never really be born.
Rhea, the wife of Cronus, having seen all of her children already been devoured, wanted to save at least one. And she does this with Zeus. She replaces his body right before Cronus is about to devour him with a large stone, wraps it in blankets, and he devours this stone in place of Zeus. So she can take Zeus to a safe place where he can grow into power, become strong, and one day come back and usurp his father for power, thus starting off the Great War.
After a series of challenges, puzzles, and traps in the temple, Kratos finally reaches the mythical box of Pandora. At his disposal is now the only way a human can defeat a god. But Ares is not about to let a mere mortal crush a god.
So, little Spartan, you've recovered Zeus's precious box, but you will not live long enough to see it opened. I will see to that. Goodbye, Spartan. You will rot in the depths of Hades for all eternity.
And with his death, Kratos is sent to the depths of the underworld and into the realm of the Dark Lord Hades.
Hades is the god of the underworld, and we also call the underworld Hades. It's a kind of a shorthand for the house of Hades. He is both the underworld and the god who represents the underworld.
He was the lord of all the souls in the underworld, of every single living being that died. And he got this position when he and his fellow brothers, Zeus and Poseidon, after they won the Great War, they had to figure out a way how they were going to split up the world. Zeus took the skies, Poseidon got the seas, and Hades got everything underneath. He got the underworld.
Hades' grip on Kratos, however, was not eternal, but short-lived.
Ah, Kratos. And not a moment too soon. I only finished digging just a moment ago.
Who are you?
Now that is an interesting question.
The old man that helps Kratos is Zeus, and Zeus's whole purpose is to guide Kratos to defeat Ares, because Ares is out of control. He's on a wreck-loose crash course, and Zeus doesn't really know what to do with him, and he's concerned that maybe Ares has ideas on getting Zeus's throne for himself.
In God of War 1, there was definitely the problem of Ares taking out the city of Athens, and I think Ares was a threat to the pantheon of gods. Ares had kind of gone crazy with power and bloodlust, and the gods were worried.
So even though the gods are very, very powerful, they still need to take on the form of humans sometimes in order to kind of steer the course of events in human affairs. They can't just will something to happen and have it happen. So we often get examples of the gods taking on human form and coming down to human beings and either advising them or tricking them in some way in order to try and steer the events in the direction they want them to go.
Most of the gods meddle in human affairs in one way or another. To do so, they have to assume mortal form. A god can't be seen by a human in his true grandeur. The human would die. It's very much like the Judeo-Christian tradition. You cannot see the face of God and live.
In Greek mythology, when you die, you go to the underworld. You're supposed to be dead before you go there, but it's a special marker of particularly exceptional Greek heroes that they can actually go to the underworld when they're alive.
The name for the journey to the underworld is actually katabasis. It means a going down, because they envisioned that the underworld was literally a place beneath the earth. Most people thought that if you go to the underworld, you're not going to come back. So only a few select heroes are able to negotiate the journey, because it's dangerous and it's scary. It requires you kind of staying within yourself.
There's a number of instances where classical Greek heroes venture into the underworld and return. They seek out typically the advice of spirits who've passed on, or sometimes even to speak with Hades himself. There was no sense of real finality in going into the underworld.
And so this obviously is pretty different from what we think of in a biblical tradition, where once your soul departs from your body, it can't get back in and you can't come back.
With his resurrection from the depths of Hades, Kratos opens Pandora's box.
The monster you've created has returned to kill you.
And challenges Ares to become the only mortal to defeat a god. After fulfilling the mission as set forth by Athena and the gods, Kratos discovers that with all that he has been through and done, it will simply never be enough.
We promised your sins would be forgiven, and so they are. But we never promised to take away your nightmares. No man, no god could ever forget the terrible deeds you have done.
Guilt runs as a theme throughout all of Greek mythology, epic and tragedy. It's a driving force. But for Greeks, it's not the sense of personal horror and regret that we tend to think of it. It's a much more objective concept, even physical.
So we often see Greek tragic characters having to deal with the consequences of the terrible things that they've done, either knowingly or unknowingly. And, you know, in our society we would use the term guilt to describe the kind of the psychological burden that you carry around with you after this. Often what we would think of as internal demons are imagined by the Greeks as real external gods.
And so how we could see this is that in an old tragedy by Aeschylus, after Orestes kills his mother, he's hounded by these dog-like old hags called Furies, and everybody can see them. They're on stage, they're abominations. And the way he gets clean from having killed his mother, it's literally he has to be purified by the gods.
Consumed by despair and unable to forgive himself, Kratos throws himself from the highest cliff in Greece. To him, death is the only escape from the nightmares. But the goddess Athena had other plans for the powerful warrior.
Sometimes, at the end of a Greek tragedy, after the hero comes to recognize that he's made a mistake and we have the reversal of fortune, this is also accompanied by what they call the recognition motif. And the word in Greek for this is anagnorisis.
Anagnorisis is a change from ignorance to awareness, according to Aristotle in the Poetics. It comes at the end of the tragedy when the hero realizes what has happened.
You will not die this day, Kratos. The gods cannot allow one who has performed such service to perish by his own hand. But now there is an empty throne in Olympus, and a new god of war is needed.
Armed with knowledge of his fate as set forth by the deities of Mount Olympus, a formidable challenge awaits Kratos, this time as the new god of war. As the god of war, Kratos begins a new chapter in his mythical saga. But with his old nightmares still haunting him, the former Spartan captain finds solace the only way he knows how.
Kratos! Another city is ready to fall! Soon all shall know the glory of Sparta!
Enough, Kratos! With every city you destroy, the wrath of Olympus grows. Soon I will no longer be able to protect you.
Against the wishes of the gods, Kratos wages a brutal war to conquer the city-states of Greece. But one must be careful when challenging the gods.
Athena! You conspire against me!
The Colossus of Rhodes was an enormous statue of the sun god Helios that stood at the entrance of the harbor on the island of Rhodes. It was a marvel of ancient engineering. It stood over 100 feet high, one of the tallest structures of any kind built in the Greco-Roman world. And it was actually cast from the discarded weaponry and armor of the unsuccessful besieger. And it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It wasn't quite wonderful enough, though. The engineering couldn't stand up to an earthquake, and after only about 50 years, it snapped off at the knees.
So one of the themes that we often do in the God of War games is take a historical event or a mythological event and kind of turn it on its head.
Once we decided to use the element of the Colossus of Rhodes as a gameplay element, it became pretty apparent that we wouldn't be able to use a natural force to destroy it. It was going to have to be Kratos himself. I think From our standpoint, making the decision in the game, it was a great game element. It turned into one of the most amazing openings for our product.
If you put a player in an environment where they actually get to control a guy who takes down one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, there's nothing really more satisfying than that. And also changing history, I think, adds a level of authenticity to the game and relevance to it.
But Zeus, the king of the gods and ruler of Mount Olympus, had his own sinister plan.
Kratos, I do not need your help, Zeus. I can take down this beast.
I offer you more than help, Kratos. I offer you power. I offer you the Blade of Olympus. It was this blade that ended the Great War and defeated the Titans. Drain your godly powers into the sword, Kratos. Only then will you reach your full potential.
Do you see, gods of Olympus? Do you need more proof than this?
Placing all of his godly power into the weapon had rendered Kratos mortal, vulnerable to the arms of death. Bloodied and beaten, he knew that to have any hope of survival, he must retrieve the Blade of Olympus.
Yes, I am forced to attend to this matter myself. Athena refused to undo her mistake. Imagine caring for a creature such as yourself.
Why? Why would you betray me?
Deceit was actually a very common practice amongst the gods. They loved to disguise themselves. In particular, they had the ability to shapeshift, and many of the gods would come down to the land of the mortals to typically revel or make love with mortals or assist sometimes heroes and provide great aid and advice. Zeus in particular was a big fan of deceit. He loved to shapeshift himself.
Zeus has 3 different roles in the God of War series. In God of War 1, he's a guide. Essentially, he sees Ares out of control, and he wants to get a man to do his dirty work. And he sees Kratos as an opportunity to take out Ares. So he guides Kratos as the gravedigger. In God of War 2, there's a shift that happens. Interestingly enough, Kratos ends up taking over Ares' spot after defeating him and becoming the new God of War, but he's essentially doing the same thing. He's out of control, and Zeus is overcome with his fear. And this fear leads him to believe that Kratos is going to come and try to kill him. So Zeus makes it his mission, his personal mission, to kill Kratos.
As the supreme ruler of Mount Olympus, Zeus makes sure that no one dare challenge his authority.
Even now, as you draw your last breath, you continue to defy me? Everything you have ever known, Kratos, will now suffer because of your sacrilege. You will never be the ruler of Olympus. The cycle ends here.
Well, Zeus was the high and mighty ruler of Mount Olympus, and he imposed his will with an iron fist.
He's unusual in the way he effects his will. His will always prevails in the long run. But other figures, the old Titans, when Prometheus wants to steal fire, he just steals it. If Ares wants to kill somebody, he kills them. Or if Athena wants to protect somebody, she protects them. Zeus, like the bureaucrat that he is, always acts through intermediaries. He gets someone else to do the job.
And with his death, Kratos returns once again to the abode of Hades. In a vision, he encounters the mother of all the Titans.
Are you?
I am the Titan Gaia, ever-present Mother of Earth. I have watched you become a powerful warrior, and I have been with you through all the events of your life, but I can no longer simply watch. We will help you defeat Zeus.
Gaia is one of the earliest gods. Her name means earth, and she really is what we'd think of as Mother Earth.
In the Great War, Gaia wasn't completely against the war between the Titans and the Olympians because Gaia, above all, wants balance.
She's often portrayed in support of Zeus. It's Gaia who helped Zeus's survival at the very beginning by helping to whisk him away and substitute him for a stone. She's generally favorable to Zeus, but she's never completely on the male side.
Gaia, I guess in mythology, is not considered actually a Titan. She's considered Earth. And we just decided to make Earth a Titan.
Gaia was one of those characters whose true background in mythology was a little more complex than the story we actually ended up telling. We kept with the theme that Gaia is still Mother Earth. Gaia is a protector, and she actually ended up evolving. In God of War 1, the narrator was not Gaia. In God of War 2, the decision was made that, wow, look, we've got this other character. What if we tied the narration into this? And that kind of added more backstory to her involvement in the product, and then we just further enhanced that in God of War 3.
In his near-death encounter, Kratos learns the ultimate way to defy Hades.
Death is an escape, Kratos. You are a warrior of Sparta, not a coward. Only a coward accepts death.
I am no coward.
Then you must fight. I will show you the way to the Sisters of Fate. Only with their power will you defeat Zeus.
In the God of War universe, the Sisters of Fate played a key role in the second game. They controlled everyone's fate. They were the ones that were responsible for creating the threads that basically everyone's lives lived on.
So every single human has a blueprint of what their fate is, and these sisters hold the keys to that.
The Sisters of Fate were also known as the Moirae, and they controlled the so-called thread of life of each living being. And this included mortals and even the gods and titans themselves.
There were the three sisters, the Moirae or the Fates. One would spin, one would measure out, and one would cut the thread of your fate, which corresponds basically to your human life.
The idea is that the shape of your life, the length of your life, has been predetermined before your birth. And the way the Greeks conceived this was the three fates.
While the sisters themselves didn't have the ability to travel through time or control time, they certainly could peer into the future and had that gift of prophecy.
For the second time, Kratos escapes Hades. On the back of Pegasus, he faces the wrath of a most unusual force.
I will not help you.
Typhon is one of the nastiest titans. Zeus, actually, after the Great War, encapsulated him inside of a mountain. And that's where Kratos finds him. He flies the winged horse Pegasus into this mountain. And Kratos needs something that Typhon has, and that's called Typhon's Bane, and it's this wind magic.
After the Great War, Zeus was being a bit too extreme with his power, particularly in his punishment of the Titans. And Gaia wanted to get back at him for this because she wanted to restore balance. And to do this, she crafted and gave birth to this incredible monster named Typhon. And Typhon's upper body reached all the way up to the stars, and his lower body was made of hundreds of serpents. And the battle between Typhon and Zeus seemed like it would never end. Zeus finally had to pick up an entire mountain and crush Typhon with it in order to defeat him. That was how strong Typhon was.
He is associated with winds, and there's been a lot of speculation whether his name might be etymologically linked with typhoon, because he is the god who releases blustering forces. Most scholars now think that it's just a coincidence, but at the same time, he is associated with winds.
From the fury of Typhon, Kratos then encounters one of Greek mythology's most tormented beings.
Who has placed you in this torment?
Zeus. My only crime was helping mankind.
Prometheus was a titan who was seen as the champion of humanity. He was always looking to help humans and develop their civilization. And Zeus, of course, on the other hand, was typically annoyed with humans, and he was constantly bickering with Prometheus.
At one point, he stole fire so that human beings would have fire to cook food. He concealed it in a fennel stalk and gave it to humans. Unfortunately, after he did that, the king of the gods got angry, Zeus, and decided to punish him.
And so in punishment of this, Zeus drives a great column through Prometheus and has a bird come and pick out his liver every day. And at the end of the day, the liver will grow back and this bird will come back. So Prometheus is kept in eternal punishment.
Please, ghost of Sparta, release me from my torment.
In scenes in Greek tragedy that we have of the binding of Prometheus, we see two henchmen of Zeus come to bind Prometheus, and they are called Kratos and Bia, two words in Greek that mean strength or force or violence.
Ironically, in classical Greek texts, one of Zeus's minions that chains Prometheus is named Kratos, where in the game we see the character Kratos freeing Prometheus from his endless punishments.
At the beginning of the War of the Gods and Titans, Kratos does the will of Zeus. He's simply a flunky of Zeus. He has no personality of his own. He can't see anything except from Zeus's perspective. He's just a thug who enforces Zeus's will.
Of course, our Kratos isn't like that, but he is a pawn. And a lot of times when you're in a creative environment, you have things that we call happy mistakes. And I think that might be one of them. Kratos, the character was completely fleshed out. The story was written and we hadn't decided on a name yet. So that was one of the things that came very late. I remember a time when we had a vote on the team and there was like 5 different options of like, what name do you like the best? And those were presented to the team, they were presented in marketing, and then it ended up becoming Kratos.
With the release of Prometheus from the tormenting binds of Zeus, Kratos sets forth in search of the Sisters of Fate on the island of creation.
We've created these islands that existed on the edge of the world, much like mythology at the time stated, you know, the world was flat and you got to the end of it, you'd fall off. Well, this island was right on the end of the world, and it was a place that many heroes of the times would attempt to get to change their fates or make something in their lives different and better. We took Theseus as one of the heroes that visited the Islands of Fate to have a wish granted to him by the sisters. And in his dealings with the Sisters of Fate, Theseus was able to get his wish granted, but the deal struck was that he had to protect a certain part of the island from all the other visitors for the Sisters of Fate.
Come forward.
Theseus is best known in Greek myth for navigating successfully the labyrinth on the island of Crete and slaying the Minotaur.
The Minotaur is a half bull, half man creature that's living in a maze, and every year it's eating 7 Athenians.
Theseus having Minotaur allies in battle, it makes perfectly logical video game sense because Theseus slayed the Minotaur. So, you know, he can spawn magical ones.
Am I the great Perseus to kill this fallen god?
Perseus is the Greek hero probably most famous for this exploit, the killing of the Medusa. The Medusa is a monster who anybody who looks at her will turn to stone.
The gods take pity on Perseus and furnish him with special tools. The Nereids, the daughter of Poseidon, furnish him with winged sandals that allow him to fly. Hades gives him the helmet of invisibility. Hermes gives him a sickle made of adamant, which is so much stronger than the old bronze that it's thought to have magical powers. And Athena gives him the one tool that isn't really magical. She simply gives him her shield of polished bronze. Yet this is the tool that is going to save the day. When Perseus finally confronts Medusa, he beheads her by looking at her reflection in the highly polished bronze surface of the shield, so he can do the job without ever looking in her face.
We added a sling to that in the game because most enemies are going to need two types of weapons in order for the fight to be interesting. They're going to need a close weapon, and they're also going to need a ranged one.
Clash of the Titans was an inspiration to us and the creative team on the God of War franchise. And beyond that, I think we tried to bring in as many Greek heroes to kind of compare. Like, they're the greatest Greek heroes, and then here comes Kratos, and you just can kind of crush them.
In Hollywood pop culture, Perseus is probably the biggest well-known guy. So let's get him in the game. We can easily have him in the Island of Fates. He's a hero. He's always trying to take on one task or another to try to prove his worth, and let's have these two guys cross paths and see what happens. Very much like Perseus, most of Kratos' weapons are blessed weapons from the gods, or magic. God of War 1 specifically, he gets magic from Poseidon, Poseidon's rage, so it's this storm of energy. And he gets the army of Hades, which is basically an undead army of souls. God of War 2, he begins to get his magic abilities from the Titans.
It's actually quite common in Greek myth that a hero about to embark on a great adventure would receive help from the gods, whether in the form of a weapon, sometimes it be a great steed, or perhaps just direction and advice on where to start their adventure.
In the God of War universe, we made very conscious choice that weapon acquisition for our main character Kratos was going to be done as much as possible through interactions with other beings and other creatures. We steered very heavily away from the idea if he just goes to a box and opens the box and, oh, there's something new for him to have.
This idea of taking weapons from bosses, you know, having the boss battle, seeing them, how they use the battle, and then acquiring it, it's not something that we invented. It's been used in games for a long time, but it just works so well in the mythology of our game. And, you know, the ideas that people came up with thousands of years ago, that we can actually take those weapons and actually get them in our game.
Upon defeating the heroes Theseus and Perseus, Kratos steps deeper into the island of creation and encounters a most familiar, high-flying legend.
Do you hear me? It is my wings that will make it across. It is my test! Do you not know who I am? Have you not heard of Icarus?
Icarus is a great character in Greek mythology, very popular. He is the son of a very famous craftsman called Daedalus, and his father makes him wings in order to help them escape from exile. But the one instruction that Daedalus says to his son is, don't get carried away, don't fly too high, don't go too close to the sun.
Having taken flight, Icarus was so enamored with his newfound ability to soar through the sky free as a bird, he flew ever closer and closer to the heavens. And having not heeded his father's warning, the wax on his wings melted, and he plunged into the sea to his death. The story of Icarus, to many people, is seen as a warning not to venture too far or to aim too high, lest people be brought down by their own ambitions.
Well, that's not what happened in God of War. In God of War, he fell to the island of creation. And Kratos finds him on this bridge. There's this massive chasm between him and the palace that unlocks this fire that the sisters are in. And they have this battle that starts up in the mortal realm and ends up right underneath the crust of the world, basically halfway between Olympus and Hades. And he ends up ripping Icarus's wings right off his body and letting him fall down to the depths of Hades. Kratos has got the wings and he knows how to use them. Of course, he can use them better than Icarus.
Taking flight using the wings of Icarus, Kratos forms an alliance with the bearer of the sky, the Titan, known as Atlas.
I awoke in the torment of the underworld, banished to the darkest pits of Hades. I would have destroyed Zeus if you had not put me here, slave of the gods. I no longer do the bidding of the gods, Atlas! I have stomached their betrayal for the last time! Show me the way to the sisters, and I will kill Zeus once and for all!
Atlas was a Titan who fought against Zeus and the Olympians in the Great War. Having lost, he was punished by Zeus by having to hold the sky separate from the earth. Of course, classical Greeks saw the sky as a sphere encompassing the earth as a whole, which leads to our modern day misconception of Atlas holding the entire world on his shoulders.
Weary from the weight of Zeus's condemnation, the mighty Titan agrees to help Kratos exact revenge on the ruler of the Olympians.
You are a powerful warrior and a worthy ally of the Titan. I have given you the last of my magic, Spartan, and I will help you across the great chasm, but that is all I can offer.
In the Palace of the Fates, he encounters a legendary foe feared by travelers around the world.
The Kraken is a sea monster of Scandinavian origin and comes from Norse mythology, but Greek myth had no shortage of sea monsters themselves. We have many stories of Poseidon sending sea monsters vengefully against sailors who refused to offer him any sacrifice before setting out to sea and into war.
With the defeat of the Kraken, Kratos rides the mythical phoenix and finally reaches the elusive Palace of the Fates.
If the Titans had won the war, it probably would be a more chaotic world. One of the things that Zeus does when he wins the war against the Titans is he sets out a kind of political system, and he tries to order as fairly as he can. He gives people political offices.
Brothers, put aside the petty grievances that have splintered us for so long. We will unite, we will stand together, and I will wipe out this plague. Olympus will prevail.
The Titans represent an earlier stage in Greek civilization. They're always portrayed as more savage.
They're unorganized, reactive, thoughtless people. They're brutes. It would be difficult to imagine how human beings could figure out a way of dealing with the Titans and their unpredictable rages. I'd think we would tend to be just cowering in fear of their cosmic rampages and frantically offering sacrifices of anything we could, hoping that something would work. Our survival would probably depend on aggression and luck.
Zeus! Your son has returned! I bring the destruction of Olympus!
I think the benefit of creating a brand new character like Kratos instead of using something that exists in Greek mythology like a Perseus or a Hercules is that it's kind of a clean slate. You can establish who this character is and what you want his story to be without getting people either riled up or people kind of like, well, I don't like that because I like this.
I have lived in the shadow of the gods for long enough. The time of the gods has come to an end.
And we can easily draw things that you find in other Greek heroes like Hercules, Perseus. Hercules slayed the Cerberus. That's what Kratos does. Perseus killed the Medusa. That's what Kratos does as well. A lot of parallels with Hercules in terms of the fact that Hercules was destined to try to kill his father. Those types of things we can inject into a fresh character along with anything else that we want to inject into that.
The biggest risks with doing that, however, is you better create with something that people resonate to, because if you miss the mark, there's nothing for them to grab onto. So I think the risk reward in this case paid off. I think having the character kind of made from scratch gave us a much cleaner slate, gave us the ability to create the story we wanted to create and to tell the story we wanted to tell.
Ultimately, Greek mythology is a package of stories dedicated to making sense of the human condition. What I mean, really a lot of Greek mythology is the hero's journey, and how we interpret what that means, we can interpret it in many ways. The hero's journey can be almost in psychological terms as a search for the self. It can be a search for one's place in society. It can be coming to terms with an unjust world and finding your place. It can be just coming to terms with death.
It explained and delved into the human condition. It helped people understand how they lived and why they loved and showed compassion, why they went to war, why they fought for what they believe in. And it's been able to endure for so long through the centuries because people have been able to take these stories, which were very elastic and very malleable, and shape them and shift them into ways that could be received by modern audiences.
And so the reason the stories evolve, we get many different versions of Greek mythology, is because, the stories evolve as the questions change and as the answers change through time and through different societies.
Mythology is always evolving because the circumstances of human life are always changing, and humans need new narratives to make sense of new circumstances, so they create new mythology.
With the mighty Titans as his allies, Kratos sets forth on a new epic war whose scale is yet to be seen in history. And so, the end has begun.